Escape to the Metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the Metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the Metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the Metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah.
Hey everyone, Matthew here. Before we begin today's show, I just want to remind everyone of this month's sponsor, Whale Street. Whale Street is the DeFi engine that powers NFT economics on a massive scale. They make huge currency swaps happen, or whale swaps as they're called, with very small slippage costs and without crashing the system. They also engineered the largest ever NFT bundle and fractionalized it into the historic B20 tokens. Whale Street is all about upside, so dip into the liquidity pools for rich rewards. For B20, join discord.com/whale. That's discord.com/WHALE. And follow Whale Street on Twitter @WhaleStreetOFFL. Thank you and enjoy the show. Okay, Jonathan, welcome to the Matthew and Rizzle show.
Hey guys, thanks so much. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Yeah, and like I was saying before, it's such an honor to speak with you. You have been in the space together with your partner in crime, Matt Condon. Digitally Rare for me has been just so inspirational, formative, and yeah, I mean, it was the original NFT podcast. But to get started, I would love to hear an introduction from your perspective about who you are, what you've been doing, and then maybe touch on your NFT origin story.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm a songwriter primarily. That's sort of like how I introduce myself. And my sort of claim to fame, although I just want to say one thing that I've been thinking about actually, like, so my claim to fame is that I've been writing a song a day for 13 years, almost 13 years. Today is number like 4,400 and something. I'm close to 4,500. But something I was thinking about was saying like, I wanted to say on Twitter that like, and I don't know, I might piss people off if I say this. I wanted to say like, having a CryptoPunk avatar is not a personality. You know what I mean? Like you but then the corollary of that I was thinking is like, you could also say like writing a song a day is also not a personality. Like, I want to be clear that like these things we hang our personalities on. Anyway, that's a maybe we can get into that. What makes our personalities?
I can feel the spiciness already. I like this. I like where we're going.
So I write a song a day. That is my personality to a certain extent. It's sort of the thing that I'm most known for. And I had never been interested in crypto. To me, as I'm sure for a lot of people, it looked like, kind of a crypto bro thing. Like I just sort of I put sort of crypto and Wall Street in the same bucket. And it always seemed like the same kind of like, weird chasing money, and just didn't interest me. And I saw a talk by a gentleman called Ethan Buckman, who works on the Cosmos project, the project that brings together all the different blockchains. I saw a really wonderful talk by him, and I can't even really explain what it was. He did do a song about crypto, like at his talk, which I really appreciated. It's something called like the Scam Train. It was about ICOs. This was in 2017. So it was a song called Scam Train, and it was about all the scam ICOs. And this talk really, really like energized me. And I was like, wow, this is actually really interesting. He started talking about the different uses of the blockchain, and that doesn't have to just be all about cryptocurrency. And so I tweeted, this was in the fall of 2017. I tweeted just asking, hey, anyone out there know anything about how I might, bring my Song a Day project and have it intersect with the blockchain? Like, does anyone have any ideas about what I might do? And another gentleman who was also at that conference called Boris Mann, who's no relation to me, who does a lot of crypto stuff, reached out, and he said, "Yeah, I do have some ideas." And he sent me $40 in ETH, and he helped me set up my MetaMask. And he literally said, "Go play," and he sent me like a couple different things. And one of the things he sent me was CryptoPunks.
Wow.
And it was immediate. You know what I mean? I was just blown away. I was just like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, 10,000 punks, song a day, one of one, proof of work, proof of song. Like, I was just like, there's something here that's like really interesting. And immediately that's when I started way back, 4 years ago. That's when my journey started of figuring out how to bring song a day into, a CryptoPunk style situation.
And what was like the first iteration of that, man? Because I can't claim as much like OG credit as Matt can. I came upon you like a little bit later, and quickly became a fan of yours, man. I mean, your style like is right up my alley. Like the goofy, weird, like fun angle on things. I like love everything about it. But dude, I gotta say, like the song that you did about Stina's piece, Stina's generated art with the generated beat, with the something about that like broke something in my brain, or like made me need to like take a step back and like seriously like look at the landscape of where this all could be headed, because you've probably done a few different things like that before, but somehow that's when it all like really crystallized to me, like the incredible like possibilities of where this is going. But I would imagine it did not start off like this, and I'm like curious to know like what your like first rudimentary steps were of like trying to roll this into the crypto world.
Totally. So what I did is, and you can look at this like as soon as like it was like September of 2017 when I discovered CryptoPunks, and that month I wrote my first CryptoPunk song. I wrote what I now just basically dub like the CryptoPunks theme song, and I sent it to Larva Labs, to the guys, specifically like with the intention of like, hey, like I'm a big fan of the project, can we meet up? And I was in Jersey City and they were in Brooklyn, so we met up, and I told basically I pitched them my Song a Day project. I was like, you just did CryptoPunks, like here's my Song a Day project, and like one of one songs, and they could be on the blockchain, and da 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 da. And they were like, it's awesome. Like, we're not doing any projects like that, but they were very like supportive and gave me a lot of advice. I initially, honestly, like one of the first things I did was I tried to raise money to hire a Solidity dev and a front end developer I bought the domain Initial Song Offering. This is a true story, ISO.
Wow.
And I tried to do essentially an ICO, but with songs, to raise money. It didn't really work. I actually got one person who did it, and I made like a couple $1,000 from this one person. And actually that person just emailed me, and they are now, I think, the CEO of Nifdex. Do you guys know? It's not.
Shit.
Yeah.
That's a good investor, man, if you're only going to have one.
Isn't that hilarious? So we're going to chat now, I guess, because, and so the way the ISO worked is that you would give me some crypto, and in exchange, I would write you a custom song. And that was sort of like, that was my, very rudimentary Initial Song Offering idea. But basically like that, for a long time, I was sort of trying to get it off the ground, and it was really difficult, as I'm sure you guys have experienced, competent Solidity devs are like hard to come by. They're all very busy. They all are overworked. And so especially back in those days, it was hard to like know whether or not something like this was even going to work, because it was even before CryptoKitties, and then CryptoKitties happened. It was like, okay, there's something here. But it really wasn't until this year when the way I was really actually able to do it was when the basic tools like OpenSea existed for a layman like me to be able to come in and make it work. Of course, that opens up all kinds of questions that I know you guys have lots of opinions on about on-chain versus off-chain, and the very kind of minimal decentralization that OpenSea does. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But but those were my very first steps: the initial song offering, the CryptoPunk song. And then I started giving talks even pretty early about like what I thought the potential of NFTs, which they weren't called NFTs then, what I thought the potential was. And I often would start those talks back then with like, if you had told me a year ago that I'd be standing here giving a talk about crypto, I would have said you are insane. Because that's how it felt. But it doesn't really feel that way anymore, to be honest.
So I don't think much longer after that was when you actually started Digitally Rare, the podcast with Matt. And I'm sort of curious, like, how did you actually meet Matt to begin with before you started recording?
Totally.
That story, super curious.
Yeah. So Matt Condon actually entered the blockchain space around a similar time as me, like in the fall of 2017. And from a similar angle, like he was very interested in digital scarcity and the potential of that. And he had written a couple of really interesting and basic Medium posts, like laying out the bare bones basics of like, what is digital scarcity? Like, what does this mean? What could the future of this be? A lot of them were co-written, if I remember correctly, with Jessica Angel, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Yeah, Jessica Angel of Art Project Decentralized fame. And I had read these articles and been like, oh, this is great. Like, this is a really smart guy. And I think I just like reached out to him for like advice on a couple things. And I had made a couple of YouTube videos under the moniker Digitally Rare. By the way, Digitally Rare, the name was named by Jason Bailey of Art Gnome. He's a master namer. If you ever, both him and Matt actually are really good at naming. If you ever need a name for something, the two of them are just like really good at coming up with the names. So I had this name Digitally Rare, and yeah, I think after like having met Matt online a few times and just like talked to him about background, like giving me background advice on some of these Digitally Rare videos I was making, I think I just pitched him and said, hey man, like, why don't we do a podcast? Like, I have the skills to edit it. Like, you have a lot of these technical smarts. Like, let's bring all this together and just start interviewing all the people that we want to talk to in the space. And he was game. And I was actually, me and my family were like staying at my parents' house in Connecticut, and I just remember it being very hot. It was like a hot summer day, and we did our first episode. It was very fun. So that's our origin story, and we actually didn't meet for the first time until I think like spring of 2018, after having done it for a while already.
Dude, so you have like quite the incredible like long-term perspective on this space. Like, just sort of curious from the bird's eye view, man, from being there from like the very, very beginning, like, has this, I mean, I don't think anyone could like totally have predicted the way it's unfolded, but like, what are your takeaways from like seeing it in its infancy and up until now?
It's been so crazy. It's been really wild to watch the last few months unfold. And there's so many different angles that I feel like I could approach that question from. Like, one of the things that has surprised me the most And I want to be clear that in continuing with the spicy aspect, like this is not shade at anybody at all. Like,
dude, spice
Get
it
ready
up,
for the
man.
shade. Get ready for the
Yeah,
spice.
yeah. Come in, fire shots. And so we encourage that.
So I would not have expected necessarily, although in retrospect, I guess I'm not surprised, but like at the time, you know, the way that Matt and I always break it down on our podcast is like, we like to think of it because, okay, let's go back. Like back in those days, one of the first questions that anyone would ask when you tried to explain this whole thing about digital scarcity and what would come to be known as NFTs was why? That was like people's first question. Why? Why do you even want to own this digital thing? Like, what is it? I don't get it. I don't get the why. So we came up with this framework of like, okay, well, there's 3 reasons essentially why you would want to own an NFT. There's a personal connection. There's number 1 is like a personal thing where this thing really resonates with you. I love CryptoPunks. They just like, they make me feel warm inside and I really like them. And so just for personal reasons, I'm going to own a CryptoPunk because I love it. Number 2 is there's this whole marketplace where you can buy and sell and you know, buy low and sell high. And there's a whole marketplace reason for owning things. It's sort of internal versus external. Those are the first 2 reasons. And then the third reason is a utility. Like NFTs are, you know, uniquely situated to unlock a whole new level of kind of really interesting actual use cases. The most obvious being like, you know, a musician letting people who own an NFT come into their show or whatever, like proof of ownership being a kind of like ticket, or, you know, all the different ways that we've seen now the NFTs have utility. So those are the 3 reasons: internal, external, and utility. And that would be our answer for why. And so the thing that surprises me is the level at which the influencers in the space, the biggest people in the NFT, within the NFT world, the people who have the power to sort of move things one way or another, fall almost entirely into the sort of marketplace camp. I see very few high-level, big-name influencers who seem to be in it purely for, or even like partly for personal reasons, like where it the actual like act of owning this given thing brings them joy. A lot of it is, so much of it is about flipping and making money and investing. And, you know, when I see someone like Gary Vee get into it and say like, this is how you're going to make money, you're going to make money flipping these NFTs, I wouldn't necessarily have expected that, given what it felt like in those early days, those very early heady days of like, we were all just so excited about owning these things, you know? I'd love to hear does my read sound correct to you guys, or am I being sort of unfair in my assessment?
Dude, I feel like we've come upon like really weird times, like really, really quickly. And it has been like, I don't know, the last few months have been insane because I feel like up until that point, like the vibe in the space is like very, very similar to what you described in terms of like, you just really have like a bunch of big kids playing around with like this creative tool. And it's like for fun. I mean, there's like some money to be made on the side, but I feel like the people like who, you know, I came up with in this space were around when like no one gave a shit and it was like a bear market and there was no money to be made. It was literally just like, ooh, look, if we could do this, then maybe we could also do this and let's just see what happens.
Right.
So it was like this insane like period of like just experimentation for the sake of experimentation. And I think there's still a lot of that going on, but it's definitely been like obscured or obstructed or clouded by like all the noise like flooding into the space. I don't know, man. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it too, man.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how you look at it, it definitely feels as if like maybe even less than a year ago, we were still all like tucked away in the Black Forest and like this little sandbox behind some like middle school or something like that. And then you close your eyes, and then the next thing you know, the Weekend, Paris Hilton, Gary Vee, like Eminem
Mark
are in the
Cuban,
sandbox
Eminem,
with you.
yeah, right.
Yeah, like you're like, what the F? But at the same time, like the sandbox is pretty big too.
It's big.
Like there's a bunch of artists who've been coming into the space and who, in my personal opinion, have kind of acted like the beating heart of the sort of like personal reasons, like as an artist, owning your production, having that automated secondary royalty stream, like these things that just weren't possible before, connecting directly with your collectors and all of that, like really heady stuff that's really important, that kind of attracted a lot of early people, in addition to the CryptoPunk crowd and these other early drivers of this space. Like that's still there for sure. It's just everyone's just so shocked that these other people are in their sandbox with them right now.
I want to be clear. I want to be clear too. Like you're saying, like there's room for everybody. And in that list of reasons to own an NFT, I have my preference. My preference is to tilt it towards the personal. And, you know, certainly I'm not like giving away my Song a Day NFTs. I'm selling them. I'm hoping to make a living off of doing that. Like there's a place for all that. The thing that I'm specifically surprised by is the sort of influencer status, basically, like the status that the community has sort of decided to focus on. Like the biggest names, even the older names in the space, are the ones who are sort of maximally towards profit versus the personal, and or a more sort of balanced thing. And I want to be clear, that's not a value judgment. You know, it's like I said, like I have my own preference, but everybody's preference is different. You know, Derek Sivers, who founded CD Baby, has a great whole thing about figuring out your reasons for doing things, like figuring out what your why is or whatever. And he has a great thing about like, listen, if your reason for wanting to do something is about maximizing how much money you make, that's great. Like do that and own that and make that your thing, and no judgments. But like the thing that I'm surprised by is how the community seems to have elevated those voices to the top, basically, of the and you know, influencer. We all hate that word, but like it really is apt. Like the influencer pyramid, basically. And I guess what I'd love to see is some of the people who are doing more of the experimental, you know, stuff for the love of it to be equally elevated. You know, I think of someone like Eric, from Art Blocks, you know, and I mean, to be clear, he's a very big name in the space. But that's just an example of something that just like I love, or you guys, you know, like there's so many people who just aren't at that same tippy top of the pyramid place where like if you see a tweet from them, they literally move markets, you know, move NFT markets. And yeah, that's something that just like I would have not predicted from the beginning.
Dude, I feel like we're at a really weird point, and I think I just said that in the NFT space, where like there is this divide in the community, especially because like, you know, I think the initial run of like celebrities, big names came in, everyone was excited, they sold some drops, and there was, you know, a lot of like buzz in the space, like, you know, we're finally making it, we're going big time, like all this stuff, and there was like, you know, some community support behind that idea. But I also feel like, you know, at this point, the technology hasn't increased to the extent where like it's easy for mainstream adoption.
Yes.
So a lot of these celebrities, fans aren't really buying their NFTs. And a lot of these drops that are starting to happen now aren't going off with the same level of success because they're really selling to the same NFT collectors, you know, maybe plus a handful more. that have always been here. And, you know, people, the crowd is starting to become educated more and realizing that a lot of these are like money grabs that aren't going to have any like long-term utility. These celebrities aren't collecting NFTs. It's not like you can check out their OpenSea wallet and they're like, you know, in turn supporting the community.
Yeah.
So I think like, you know, if a solution comes out in the short term that solves this like mainstream adoption problem where someone can easily hop on with a credit card and purchase anything from anyone from anywhere and, you know, sort of solves that accessibility problem, then I think we're sort of like doomed to this like money grab, like gotcha type of thing for a while. But if that's like, you know, sort of remains unsolvable, even for like, you know, a little bit longer, I think like the narrative is starting to shift back into the direction of the creators, because there's just not enough like normal people out there who want to jump through all the hurdles to get an NFT, in my opinion.
It's so funny because that, like I was saying earlier, like that is a conversation literally that we've been having for 4 years. You know what I mean? This exact conversation of like, and now that we've seen this enormous wave happen, it becomes even more kind of urgent, right? To like solve these goddamn problems of like MetaMask is still too confusing for most people, you know? I still get nervous every single time I send, you know, I
just
still
did this the other day, man. Yes.
Hit the button and I get nervous and it's hard not to. And yeah, I don't know how those problems get solved. You know, different platforms have solved them in different ways. And I think honestly, like I am a really big fan of OpenSea and what they're doing. I think they're working pretty hard at making things as accessible as possible. But it's nowhere near what it needs to be. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Like if we don't increase the number of people who actually like are in the space and collecting NFTs, it's going to be really difficult. It's going to continue to be really difficult. That was a question that Art Gnome actually brought up in a really memorable episode of Digitally Rare. Like we asked for everyone's hot takes, and his hot take was like, we have too many artists and not enough collectors. And it still, to some extent, feels that way. Even in this big frothy period that we've been in.
Yeah, certain things I just hear over and over, like the kind of lamenting upon that imbalance. But it's interesting, like 2 years ago to hear that, and then 2 years later to still hear the same thing, when obviously, like relative to the period ago, like it's grown. Everything has grown, right? Maybe not as quickly as you'd like, but there's definitely platforms that are, exactly. Progress is for sure happening. And I think half of the thing that we were just talking about, like focusing on celebrities and stuff, like it's just narratives, right? Yeah. And at any given time in that progress cycle, certain narratives will be something that it's easier to tell first off for folks and tweet about as well. And it's just something that folks kind of it's easier for them to understand, right? So money talks, and people that aren't in the space, they can hear like these ever increasing numbers to drive them here, which is very important. But it feels like it's time to kind of shift that narrative, because people get tired of hearing the same thing. And that's where this open sandbox for experimentation across all these crazy vectors, like blockchain powered virtual real estate, the music side of things, which has really been kind of kicking off this year. And I think we'll segue into that with you and what you've been doing with your most recent kind of foray into the space of selling tokenized music. There's the DAO side of things. There's the pure collectibles. There's the art, right? Yeah. And
we're in the very beginning of all of that. We're in like the tippy beginning. Yeah.
Exactly. It's super early days, but within those verticals, there's all these individual creators who are doing, frankly, really, really interesting things. Yeah. And in my personal opinion, for like these new quote unquote bigger names that are coming in, there's a subset, maybe a larger percentage than you'd think about, that are kind of setting up their own Discord servers, learning how you can have tokenized access. Bringing the collector base in and actually kind of setting this thing up for a longer run, thankfully, right? But it's time for that larger experimentation that kind of ignites this whole other like light bulb in front of folks' minds, and like, oh, it's more than just coming in and actually earning money for selling these digital assets or buying and investing, right? So I'd love to kind of hear you talk a little bit more about your experience with your initial song offering back in the day, and what you've been doing kind of recently, selling your like first 365 songs that you recorded each day. Like just compare and contrast, and then look forward. Would love to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to say one other thing about how it's changed, like to go along with that conversation, is like there's one really important thing that's changed like in terms of like the entire world knowing about this space. And that is this really simple fact. Like 3 months ago, no one outside of our space knew what an NFT was. And now literally everyone, from, you know, my mom to my landlord, knows what an NFT is. And that, just that, I think was enough. If that's all we get out of this big explosion of the last few months, and it goes back to being the way that it was, that will be enough. Just the fact that they know now.
Well said, man.
Yeah, that we don't have to explain it. We don't have to, as Matt Condon always likes to say, as soon as you say the word fungible, you've lost. You know, you're done for if you have to say the word fungible. So the initial song offering, basically, like, it took me a while to hit on this idea of I was like, how do I represent the songs on like on chain, like on the blockchain, on a site, even just like visually, how do I represent the songs? I don't want them, all my songs have videos to go with them. I don't just want like the video thumbnails, because they're also weird looking and different. I want something more standardized. I want something that I can look at the way that I look at CryptoPunks. Like, you know, as soon as I discovered CryptoPunks, like my favorite thing to do was just like sit there and just scroll and just like look at them all, because they were all so cool. And it reminded me of being a kid and playing with these. I don't know if you guys are the right age for this. There was this toy when I was a kid called a Muscle Man.
Yes.
And like little pink muscle men. And I wasn't much of a collecting kind of kid, but I loved these fucking things.
Yes.
Like,
I don't even know why, man. I had a ton of those things too. I think they came in like packs or something,
exactly.
Right?
No, exactly. And it was just a collecting thing, but there were these little pink men and they're little wrestlers, and they all looked different. You know, they're all the same but different, like CryptoPunks, like Pokemon, like anything. And that's what I wanted to do. I was like, I want someone to feel that same feeling when they're looking at Song a Day, so that it can draw them in to actually like wanting to hear the music in a different kind of way. So eventually I hit on this idea of, I worked with a designer friend of mine to like create the idea of like, you know, there'll be these images, and the images of the songs will contain the sort of metadata for the song. So the images basically consist of a background, which is a place, and that's the place where the song was recorded. So in the first year, you have places like New York, LA, Connecticut, all the places where I was in 2009. That's the place. And so that's like one layer of the image. And this is something, of course, we're very familiar with now. At the time, I was like, I'm just taking a playbook right from CryptoPunks. It was like, they have these attributes. Here's my attributes: the place, the face. There's like a little me in the image, and the face of the little me is the mood of the song. So if the face looks sad, it's a sad mood. If the face looks happy, excited, nervous, drunk is one of them. That's the attribute of the song, depending on what the mood was of the song. The instrument that the little me is holding, obviously, is like, okay, if the main instrument is banjo, he's holding the banjo. And then the sort of most difficult one is topic, and figuring out how to like separate topics out of 365 songs to start is like a sort of a difficult task. But there's topics like politics, animals, commissions, songs that I did for commissions, all these different topics, and those are in that first year they're represented by the outfit that I'm wearing. So if it's an Apple based song, I'm wearing like a black turtleneck because I wrote about Steve Jobs a lot. So once we hit on this, I hired an illustrator, and I used actually the money that the Niftex guy gave me for literally, this is what happened. The one guy who gave me the ETH for the initial song Offering, who's now the head of Niftex, I took that money and hired an illustrator to make all these layers. Like I tagged all the songs, I had to make all the layers, and then I had a coder friend, put together a thing where it puts all together all the layers depending on what each song is. So that's like basically the extent to what I did back then. I had a front end developer make a front end. Like many different people took a pass at that. Eventually, even Matt, my co-host, took a pass at that. But I never quite found the Solidity dev to do the market side of things. And eventually it just sort of like, I couldn't sustain it. It just sort of like, especially once the pandemic hit, I lost a lot of my gigs, my live conference gigs that I was doing. The main way I made money pre-pandemic was going to conferences and recapping them with a song. So I'd watch all the talks at a given conference. I'd sit there for 8 hours watching talks, and then at the end, I'd get up and sing a song that I had just written based on all of the talks, basically. And that was, I was doing one of those a month, more or less, before the pandemic. Then the pandemic ended, pandemic started rather, and shit got really tight, and I just had no bandwidth to like spend on continuing to try to do the song day thing. So then what happened was, I actually saw Beeple's sale, and I was like, oh, people are paying attention. People are like actually paying attention to NFTs again now. Like there's something happening. And so, this was just a couple of months ago, really. And, the first thing I did, I just started, talking to old friends and seeing what was up. I looked at OpenSea. I was like, OpenSea is getting pretty close. They have the gasless minting. Because if you think about what it costs to mint 365 songs, like that could get intense, versus just doing the one-time minting of the contract, and then the way that they have it now with the gasless minting. And then I started showing the illustrations to people that I had made, and the response was underwhelming, basically. People were like, these illustrations are cool, but they don't really do it for me, which was interesting because back when I was first doing it, part of what I was imagining was like, this first year, these illustrations should be as approachable as possible. That was my thinking. Like, it's already very confusing. I want the illustrations to be like very approachable and kind of, but what that ended up being was bland. So that's when I reached out to Defaced Studio, Kane, who makes, these amazing illustrations, of really amazing artist in the space. And I offered him like 40% of the sales of the first year as sort of payment to do the illustrations. And he did like a freaking incredible job. And so I had him redo all of them. And then it was just like I was off to the races. When OpenSea finally added the ability to put traits, where you could add properties and traits directly in OpenSea. And by the way, they are working on I think before this quarter is out, they're going to have a way to what's the word they use? Like basically send all of the metadata and everything onto IPFS and Arweave. So that's happening. But once they had the gasless minting, once they had the ability to add all the traits, I hired a sort of a personal assistant to help me just like upload every single video, put in the illustration, add all the traits. I mean, you can imagine this for like 365 songs. It's like an insane amount of work. And we did that. And then I hooked up with Satman. You guys know Satman, satman.eth.
Yeah.
And he's launching basically his sort of like NFT consulting firm essentially, and him and his team like helped me set up my Discord and like get that going in a fun way, and we had a really successful launch with the first 365 songs. We actually sold. I was like very surprised. We sold out in less than half an hour, which I was like, I had told my wife early in the day. I had said like, if we sell out in a day, I will consider it a success. If we don't sell out in a day, it basically is a big failure. It's like, but we sold out in half an hour, and I was like, okay, that was fucking awesome. Like that felt really good. So yeah, that's the full arc of what it took to get sort of song a day. This dream that I had the moment that I saw CryptoPunks sort of finally come to fruition. That's the full arc.
Dude, of all these songs throughout this entire journey, do you have like does one stick out, or has one led to like a particular experience that sticks out, or like, can you, when you look back at them all, can you cherry pick a couple that like really, really stand out to you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I wouldn't say these are necessarily my favorite, but I could tell a few stories that I think are interesting. Like, so actually, what I'm doing, what I'm readying now, is year 2 of Song a Day, and that is going to drop sometime in May. I haven't exactly decided yet. Mid to late May is when year 2 is going to come. And there's a really fun song from year 2 that I'm thinking about most. Like every song from the first year I sold for 0.1 ETH, just like across the board. Year 2, I'm going to do 0.12, and I'm just going to raise it by that 0.01 amount every single year. So year 3 will be 0.13, etc. That's just how my very, very, very slow ramp is what it's going to be. But there's one song that I was thinking about doing it as more of an auction and less of a buy now kind of situation. And that is the iPhone 4 antenna song, which was my first song to have 1 million views on YouTube.
Cool.
And it was used by Steve Jobs to open a press conference.
Awesome.
So I'll tell that story if you want to hear it.
Yeah, man.
Basically, so if you recall, in 2010, there was something called AntennaGate with the iPhone 4. Does that ring a bell at all to either of you? No. Okay. So AntennaGate was this big scandal. I mean, it was literally like headline news, CNN, Fox News, CNBC, where if you held your iPhone 4 a certain way, you would lose some bars, basically. And this was like a huge deal. It was like Apple's big scandal. Their iPhone 4 loses, and it was such a huge scandal that Steve Jobs literally called short his Hawaii vacation to rush home and have essentially what was their first ever defensive press conference. If you think about Apple, they always are having these very curated, perfectly like manicured press conference to say exactly what they want to say, and it's all very much on their terms. This was the very first time ever that they had to have a press conference, and I don't think they've done it since, that was essentially like addressing an issue that the public was having with one of their products. So I had written this song basically defending Apple because I'm an Apple fanboy, and the the crux of the song was basically like, this is not a big deal. And the chorus of the song went like this. It was like, if you don't want an iPhone 4, don't buy it. If you got one and you didn't like it, bring it back. That's the chorus of the song. And so I posted this song, and then I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and there was an email in my inbox, and the email was PR@apple.com. And I ignored it because I thought someone was trolling me, because it was like, it's really easy to spoof an email address. So I was like, that's not real. And so I was in the shower and my phone rings and it says unknown. And like, to this day, I don't know. I mean, they're Apple, so they obviously have my phone number, but it's like, how did they? Anyway, so I pick up the phone. I'm in the shower literally, and I pick up the phone, and he says, "Hi, my name is Steve Dowling. Steve, meaning Steve Jobs, saw your video this morning and he really liked it. And he would like to know if we could use it in the press conference that's happening this morning in a couple hours." And I'm literally standing there naked in the shower, and I'm like, yes. And so a few hours later, Steve Jobs literally comes out on stage, having the song had just played on the screen there in the theater. And he comes out on stage and he says, this is a direct quote, and believe me, I've memorized the quote. He said, "Thanks for joining us. We saw that on YouTube this morning and we couldn't help but want to share it," is what he said about the song.
That's awesome.
So anyway, so that song is going on sale. So I was thinking like, maybe that song should have like an auction that, the rest of the songs will be 0.12, and then that song will be available for an auction. We'll just see what people are willing to pay for this little piece of history. I also thought maybe you guys you tell me what you think of this. The thing that I got for that, so, they used it, and then a couple days later, Steve Dowling, who at that time was just like a PR guy, he calls me back, and he literally says, "What do you want? What do you want?
Jesus.
We used your song. We're Apple." And so it's like, you have to imagine, like, I'm 26, like, I'm making very little money, and like
an iPhone with an antenna that works.
Yeah, right. Like, and the PR guy for like one of the large national corporations in the world, whatever. So I very sort of sheepishly say, like, an iPad. And so that's what I got. I have an original iPad. So I was thinking almost, what if the auction is both for the song and then also this like original iPad? It's not signed or anything, I don't know, that Apple sent to me as a result, and that could be like your certificate or whatever for buying the one of one. I thought that might be kind of fun. So that's one song that especially in year 2 that really like stands out. It's like that was a really big deal.
Yeah.
I love that
Dude,
story.
what a great story.
Yeah. And then the fact that folks can kind of collect this little bit of history from that's connected in all these interesting, weird ways. And again, like, it's memorialized in the podcast. Maybe we just bundle this podcast in as like
there you go,
as an add-on or something like that. Just like that full, rich story. And I'm sure you've told this multiple times, obviously. I mean, you have that down perfectly, by the way.
Yeah, it's my like, I always think about that movie I Heart Huckabees, where the guy tells the story about mayonnaise and Shania Twain, and he like tells us, I'm totally that guy where I tell that story, and I'm like, I mean, when I would do talks, that's a big story that I do at talks. But yeah, I mean, it's a great story. You can't get around the fact that it's like, it has some good arcs to it. Yeah.
Shout out I Heart Huckabees. I haven't thought about that movie in at least a decade.
I love that movie. Soundtrack is amazing. Movie. Yeah.
+1. So, segueing from there, we were talking, I think we were talking about this before we started recording. And I kind of wanted to revisit it and get your spicy take on this. These days, there's just been this explosion of CryptoPunk avatars all over, in particular, Twitter and Discord.
Right.
It's very interesting. And like, everyone seems to have their own version of it, or like a derivative of it, whether it's original or not. Just like, like what do you make of that as someone who was early into the CryptoPunks back in the day?
I do want to say, like, I do think that's a legitimate critique. Like, having a CryptoPunk avatar is not a personality, or even owning a CryptoPunk. Even I want to say, and I am throwing shade here, but like, owning a very expensive CryptoPunk is not a personality. It's not. You got there's
whispers,
but that's okay, because like I said, ultimately, writing a song a day is also not a personality. So we all do things, we all latch onto things, and we all find ways to like to fill our personality bucket in a different way. So I don't want to throw too much shade. I will say that, like, I did a song recently that that is essentially just a list. I don't know if you guys saw this one. It's a list of all of the punk derivative projects on OpenSea. And I literally just like, I just go through them. I just like, Picasso punks. Here, I'm going to do this for you. This is just a really fun thing to do occasionally. I don't know if you guys have done this yet. Let's see. So, okay, you ready? I'm just going to go through them.
Yeah.
Picasso punks, Crypto Baby punks, OG punks, Bastard Gan punks, Louvre punks. Okay, that's just in the first 100. Let's keep going here. I'm not done. Metal punks, MIDI punks. By the way, I like MIDI punks. I think MIDI punks is cool. Da Vinci punks.
It's hard not to like a couple of them.
Yeah, exactly. 3D punks, voxel punks, crypto punks and Cybertrucks. The Beeple punks, the hash punks, fine art punks, Doge punks, 3D voxel punks, modern art punks, rune punks, unencrypted punks, Escher punks, Ross Bobby punks, Mosh punks, museum punks, 360 punks, obscure punks, Jackson Pollock punks, dystopian punks. I could keep going. I'm only in the 300s now of the top on OpenSea. You could keep going. So I literally did a song just basically calling out all of these different ones. The point essentially being like, there's a really fine line, right, between homage and just like we talked about before, like a quick, trying to make a quick buck. And it's hard to know who's who. And maybe everyone is a little bit of both, which I guess is fine. It's hard not to feel like my favorite indie band, that only I knew about, and this is a little hipster, is suddenly really big, and I feel so happy for them. Like, oh my God, everyone is now recognizing how amazing this thing is that I love, and I can't help but there also being a layer of like, oh, but it was like, it was just us, like we were like, yeah. So there's both feelings for sure. The Christie's thing is just absolutely insane. Just like, I mean, that's a whole other level for sure. But ultimately, CryptoPunks is literally the reason that I'm here doing this. Like, that's, that cannot be denied. And so if that's how it feels for, now literally tens of thousands of other people, I can't ultimately judge you too harshly, because that's literally me too. We all just love this project.
How crazy is it? I mean, I love the metaphor, like feeling like you had this indie band that only you and a select few folks knew about. They blew up. Let's think about that and take that further. In that example, usually the fan is just kind of left with their memories. Whereas with CryptoPunks, if you really were that fan, and you had even one or multiple of these, now that's life-changing money.
Literally.
For Snowfro, I mean, that powered art blocks and this other incredible project. It's crazy to think about.
I love that story. I love that story so fucking much. Me
too.
His story is just so great. And do you guys know the zombie story, his burned zombie story?
No, I don't know that one.
Oh God. Okay. So Snowfro, right? being who he is, needed to collect one of every trait of CryptoPunk. So he had gone through, this is before they really blew up, but he had gone through and curated this perfect collection of having one CryptoPunk that had every single trait in the entire thing, right? And he set up a little gallery in CryptoVoxels. I forget exactly. Maybe it's Decentraland. I forget which one it was. Anyway, he created like a little gallery, which is still there. You can visit, which showcases all these punks. And he was sending all the punks, this perfect trait list of punks to a singular wallet address to sort of make it easier to manage. And as he was sending these punks, I think it was something like 74 punks he was sending, he accidentally burned one. He accidentally sent, and it was a zombie. He accidentally burned a zombie punk while doing this project. And so there is literally, if you go on and you see like there's 9,999 punks available because one of them is gone fucking forever.
Wow. Forever. That is crazy.
But I love that story. So I just feel like the thing about punks, though, and the main reason it has such power, and the Larva Labs guys recognized this way back in 2017, when I had lunch with them. One of the first things they talked to me about was like, what's making it work is the stories. Like even back then, it was stories as simple as like, did you hear about Stray Bits, like, and how he got all these apes and he got all these zombies. He just, now people are buying them for like all this money. Did you hear this? It's crazy. The stories that evolve around this group of punks is really what sets the project apart in a lot of ways. Like once you start digging into those stories and the lore, there's like a deep, deep, deep lore. I just love it. I love it so much, and I don't begrudge anybody. Anything having to do with it, really.
Dude, it is an interesting like phenomenon though, right? Because like for a long time, up until very, very recently, when I would stumble upon someone with like a punk profile or something on Twitter, I would automatically assume that I either know them or someone I know knows them, or they're like, they're like one of us, and
they're a kindred spirit.
Yeah, exactly. And you can say the same thing for like Avastars for like a long time up until recently. And then like all of a sudden I'm like, damn, like who are all these people, man? There's like so many punk avatars, so many Avastar avatars now of like people and coming out of the woodwork I've never heard of. Dude, I'd be really interested to hear, and this is actually like one of the questions we always like to ask our guests towards the end. Considering your like OG collecting status, man, what are other projects that have like really intrigued you along the way, or like that you've also found yourself being like an avid collector of?
Yeah. So, obviously autoglyphs was one that just blew my mind. Right. And I have one autoglyph. I have one punk and one autoglyph, both because for me it was there was no thought, and there still is no thought, that I would ever sell them. Like why would I buy these things to sell them? I'm buying them because I love them. And so I only got one of each. If I had thought of selling them, I probably would have bought more, to be honest, but I didn't. Never even occurred to me. Another project that I'm actually a really big fan of is Robin Sloan, who's an author. His project called Amulets. Are you guys familiar with this one?
Oh, where you try to string together like a haiku or something to get a words for that one?
Yeah.
That Matt has become like obsessed with.
Yes. And so what I really love about it is it takes the idea of the hash, right? This unique string of numbers that every crypto object has. And it turns it into a game almost, a really beautiful sort of poem game. So the way it works is you're given this little text box, and below the text box, you can watch in sort of real time as you add text what the hash for that text will become, right?
Cool.
And so the object of the game is to find rare amulets. And so if in the hash there are 4 8s next to each other in the hash, that's called like a common amulet. And you can get it up to like whatever mythic or whatever the highest level is, where you get like 16 8s in a row. And what you're doing is you're trying to write these little words, and they end up just being these really beautiful little like tome poems to try to form what's called these amulets, these rare strings of numbers that happen to have a bunch of 8s right next to each other. Now, why 8s? I don't know. Why this many 8s? I don't know. But like, it's super fun. It's like it's using the technology of the thing to like create really interesting constraints and art. And I that project doesn't really get a whole lot of love. Obviously, like, there's nerdy people who really love it, but I'm such a big fan of that. And I want to do a version. I've been talking to people about trying to figure out, is there a way to do it with, instead of writing words, what if you were writing notes on a staff and you were trying to find amulets out of, or I would call them bells, maybe. I don't know. You'd have to find a different word, but like try to find melodies on a staff that create these rare combinations of, maybe it's 7s we're looking for instead of 8s. I don't know, but like that's my idea of it. I also want to say, I do really like MIDI. Have you guys seen MIDI punks?
You brought that up though.
This is the one punk project that I'm willing to be on board with. None of the other ones honestly really move me that much, but MIDI punks is awesome. It takes the 25 by 25. It takes a given 25 by 25 punk, and it turns the pixels of the punk into MIDI notes. And so,
cool.
And so you watch this little progress bar go across the punk, and they've basically programmed the MIDI to play a little tune, whether it's like, sometimes it's really like distortion-y and like electronic. Sometimes it's very like soft and pretty. It's very well done. I'd say it's very tasteful. And it does something completely new with the punk thing. And it actually, the reason I probably like it is because it reminds me of I did a as soon as autoglyphs came out, I did the exact same thing. I translated my autoglyph into music. I assigned each little hash mark a note and a length, and I made it into music essentially. And so like, to what you were saying, Rizzle, like, that's been a huge part of my joy in this space, is to find ways of like combining different projects and musicifying, if that's a word, songifying them in like a fun way that adds another dimension. So anything that involves that, I'm like a huge fan of. This has like been something I've loved about the space from the very beginning.
That's really cool. Euler Beats is doing something interesting musically.
Oh my God.
On the music side in particular, I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface.
I mean, exactly. Async Art is about to launch their music stuff, Async which is just going to be beyond cool. Yeah,
we had Sam Bruckman on, and he blew our minds for like 45 minutes explaining that initial project on
Holy shit.
Fair Degree.
That project is just going to be so freaking cool. Like, the choir project, that one.
Fair Degree, Amelia Earhart, or whatever.
Jesus.
Wow.
Brian Brinkman, like, it's bringing together all these things. Like, forget about it.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
So great.
It's so fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm actually working on a few different Euler beats. Like, so Beat DAO contacted me and wanted to do something. So I'm doing a project with them where I'm remixing one of their Euler beats. They have a bunch. They have like 4. Beat DAO has like, Beat DAO, BEET.
Yeah.
They have like 4 Euler beats. So I'm remixing one of them into a song the song is gonna explain what the Harburger tax is. Do you guys know about Harburger tax?
Not enough to write a song about it.
Big.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's essentially a ripoff of his project. I have his permission. It's gonna be a song using this Euler beat that explains Harburger taxes, and it's going to be for sale under the Harburger tax model. Essentially, like his project,
Yes.
this
Amazing.
artwork is always on sale. It's going to explain it in great depth about like exactly how it works, and then you can own the song as a Harburger tax model thing.
I think we could talk forever. I'm so happy we finally got a chance to talk like this.
Yeah,
man.
It's been phenomenal.
Me too. Thanks, guys. Next we'll have another whole hour. You guys will come on Digitally Rare, and we'll have the 4 of us will chat.
Honestly, would love that. But before we go, make sure you let folks know where they can follow you at. I think you mentioned a couple upcoming drops, releases, and all that good stuff. So just remind people maybe when they should mark their calendar for.
Yes, please. So if you're hearing this before April 27th, April 27th is the day of my 4,500th song, and we're dropping in conjunction with Satman and his team. We're dropping 10 Song a Day songs that have been remixed by Eclectic Method.
Yes.
Short remixes. They're all under 20 seconds long, and the remixes have all been animated by different animators in this space. So Brian Brinkman did one, Miguel Garest did one, Bananakin did one, Everfresh did one, other names, other people in the space that you love. So April 27th, 10 remixes by Eclectic Method, 10 different artists. Each of these remixes are going to be 0.05 ETH a piece, and there's going to be 100 of them. And if you collect all 10, you get what we're calling the album cover. And the album cover, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, is by Daim. Do you guys know Daim?
I don't think so.
Daim.
Not with that pronunciation.
I don't know how to pronounce his last name. His work is amazing. He does really cool, amazing, generative, fractal artwork. So you collect all 10 of these remixes, you get this really cool cover. That's about in a week. And you can join my Discord, which you can find by going to my Twitter, which is Song a Day Man with 2 N's. Song a Day Man. That's me.
Love that. Well,
that's
again,
the story.
Jonathan, such a pleasure to be able to chat with you. And thank you so much for giving us your time.
No, thank you guys. My pleasure. Absolutely.
So keep on creating and making that beautiful music, man.
You know I will.
Awesome. Thank you, man. It was great.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Hey, everyone. Matthew here. Thank you for listening to today's show. I just want to remind everyone of this month's sponsor, Whale Street. Whale Street is the DeFi engine that powers NFT economics on a massive scale. They make huge currency swaps happen, or whale swaps as they're called, with very small slippage costs and without crashing the system. They also engineered the largest ever NFT bundle and fractionalized it into the historic B20 tokens. Whale Street is all about upside, so dip into the liquidity pools for rich rewards. For B20, join discord.com/whale. That's discord.com/WHALE. And follow Whale Street on Twitter @WhaleStreetOFFL. Thank you, and see you next episode.